Welcome back to Season 2 of the 5-Star Council Podcast, the 5-Star Counselor Bootcamp. Over the next 6 weeks, in 12 episodes, I'm taking you step by step through my service framework. Every episode focuses on one key aspect of service, not only tackling common misconceptions about that aspect, but also giving you clear takeaways and tactical exercises for you to do on your own. This will help you develop service in your firm so that it works for you, your employees, and your clients. I'll help you build the firm clients rave about because you, your clients, and your employees are happier, leading to more referrals, repeat business, and 5-star reviews. Let's get started. Welcome back to the 5-Star Council Podcast. Today, we're wrapping up our 3-part mini-series on the elements of service. Today, we're talking about consistency. When we think about consistency, what I want you to think about is how do we make sure that we're delivering the same high result day in and day out. This isn't just hitting high standards, it's making sure that for every client and every day, you're hitting those same high standards. If you're not hitting those high standards on 1 or 2 clients, does that indicate a larger problem? This also isn't the staging exercise that we thought about earlier. What we're doing is setting up a ruler so everyone on the team knows if they've done a good job on a particular task, and then knowing if they're doing a good job as a team for every client every day. So what we're going to be doing today is building on those stages and those standards that you've already built out. We want to set up the ruler so everyone knows if they're doing a good job on their work. The question you always want to have an answer to is, are we hitting the standards we've set for ourselves? We'll help you quantify this so you know if you've done a good job and followed the process, not just for one client, but for all of them. If we think about our service-focused businesses, hotels, restaurants, what they're doing is all about consistency. The Four Seasons is focused on delivering that same high level of service day in and day out in 150 or more hotels throughout the globe. Hitting those standards is not just a one-time thing. You have to hit it for everybody. Doesn't mean that mistakes aren't made, but they need to be identified and then they need to be corrected. So we've built out our systems and we now need to make sure that we're being consistent about implementing them. The checklists are there, the steps and the stages are there to make sure people know what they need to do. But you as the owner need to know that they're being done consistently. At the hotel, we had 2 ways of checking for our consistency on this. As a manager, part of my job was to test standards for the employees who worked for me. Every day, I'd be testing at least one employee, if not a few, on their standards. Were they performing check-ins correctly? This could be done in one of 2 ways. There were 2 ways that I could test a front desk agent on whether or not they were hitting their standards. I could either pretend to be a guest checking in and have my agent run through the standards on checking me in without actually checking somebody into the hotel, just to make sure they were doing the right things with me. This, of course, is play acting. It's good for making sure everybody is up to speed. That front desk agent also knew that it was me, and they knew they were being tested. The other way would be for me to listen in on a check-in as it was being done by one of the agents. I could either stand next to the agent at the front desk in a way that it looked like I was doing my own work, but just happened to be standing there, or I could just be in the lobby and pay attention to what was happening from a little bit further away. This gave me a chance to follow along with exactly what was happening with a real guest and my agent. The benefit is they knew that I was watching, but at the same time, they were focused on actually performing in front of a real guest. Of course, the problem with both of these versions is that agent generally knew that I was around. What happens when I'm not there watching? This is where secret shopping comes in. You've probably heard about this before. Service companies will pay people to pretend to be clients or customers at their restaurant or hotel, have them come in, run through a few tasks, and make sure that they're getting the consistent experience that that business wants. We wouldn't know when they were coming, but we knew at least twice a year, 2 or 3 guests would come. They wouldn't be connected. You'd have no way of knowing that they were secret shoppers, but they'd come in, stay for a few days, and then at the end of it, they'd request a boardroom to be set up for a meeting that day along with the upper level management of the hotel. Then they would go through everything that happened to them while they were at the hotel. They would have already transcribed every interaction that they had with a hotel staff member. How would they do that? Well, they'd been recording everything that had happened since they got there. So, when I was lucky enough to check in the secret shopper, I had a full transcript of everything I'd said. Every word, phrase, and was transcribed in black and white for me to review with my manager and see where I was going wrong. This was great, and it provided that third-party independent verification of exactly what we were doing. Even if things weren't perfect, and for the time I was the person who checked in a secret shopper, it wasn't perfect. I demonstrated exactly what I needed to do to make sure that the guest was getting the Four Seasons treatment. Specifically, the person I checked in got there early on Valentine's Day. They had arrived at about 10 in the morning on a Saturday that happened to be Valentine's Day. Because it was a Saturday morning, we didn't have many rooms ready at 10 in the morning, and certainly not the type that we had reserved for this gentleman. What I did was follow my instructions and follow the standards. While we didn't have a room for him, I still offered him other places in the hotel that he could use immediately, like the spa, the restaurant, and the lobby lounge. We offered to store his luggage. We offered to take care of him in the meantime. So even though he didn't have his particular room, we were ready for him in one way, and we could start taking care of him. This is what was more important, taking care of that guest immediately and not saying, well, we didn't hit the standard of having the room ready when he arrived, therefore this was wrong. It was all about taking care of the guest and realizing that not everything's going to be hit every time. So turning to your law firm, how can we apply this to what you're doing? As far as I know, there are no secret shoppers for law firms yet. If you're interested, give me a call. Maybe we can talk about a way to do it for your firm. But what we do in mine is we do secret shop. We have our own staff members reach out through our various touch points, phone, email, website, to see if they're getting treated the way they should be. Are we actually following up? We have several different scenarios set up, and so we know, based on those scenarios, exactly what should be happening. If this person is asking for something we don't do, we need to make sure that we're getting them the referral as soon as possible. And by tracking this, we also know exactly what is happening and who needs to work on what. If you look internally, well, it's not just those first reach outs to clients that we need to think about in terms of a consistent product. I also want to think internally about how the documents that I'm receiving, for example, from my associate attorney are consistently created. It slows the entire process down if we're creating the same documents with the same mistakes over and over. So being able to identify why a document doesn't meet standards instead of just saying, this doesn't work, helps my associate get better faster. She's learning it's not just, this was wrong, go fix it. It was, this particular thing is wrong. We need you to look at this mistake. You're missing these grammatical mistakes. Or when you think about it this way, you forgot to think about this downstream consequence. Coming up with the list of potential mistakes so that you can start tracking those internally and showing those to your associates or other employees so that they know it's not just random things. For every 4 out of 5 documents, we're seeing that you aren't hitting spell check. For 3 out of every 5 documents, you're failing to check for broken internal references. Things like this will help your staff get better faster. On the other side of it, if you're consistently missing these standards, you want to look at 2 possible sources. Obviously, it may be the person who works for you is just not hitting that standard, and they need some training or guidance to get better at it. The other side of it is, maybe the standard is too high. You may not be ready to have a particular standard, and you want to make sure that you've got the right standard in place. Consistently failing isn't going to help you. So when you think about your standards, make sure you're also looking back at exactly what that standard is. Is it a reasonable request for your staff to deliver in this way? If your standard is that every email gets a response within half an hour, the standard is not going to get met. If nothing else, occasionally your employees need to sleep, and you've got to recognize that. So making sure that you have standards that are reasonable for everyone involved. You, your employees, and your clients will help make this work. For certain standards, like email response, you'll want to make sure that this client knows exactly what that standard is as well. If your client knows that if they email you, it should get a response within at least 24 hours, they know not to worry if it's been 10 minutes. What you could also do is make sure that your clients have links to schedule time with you to talk through Calendly. Having that 15-minute call makes sure that they know when they're going to talk to you and that you'll know what they're calling about. It helps by reducing the amount of shifting you're doing between one task and the other. You'll be able to prepare for that call and be ready to better answer that client when they've called you. So as we bring this episode to a close, our closing exercise this time is, how do you test yourself? You're going to be setting up your own secret shopper program. What should you be testing people on? It may be how fast phone calls are received, how quickly a new client gets a certain amount of information from your firm. It may be how long it takes to get through a particular process. But what you want to do is make sure you know exactly how you're going to evaluate your staff. At this point, don't worry about testing absolutely everything. Pick one or two things you want to test, figure out the standard for it, and then figure out how often you're going to test it. Testing phone calls can be done in 2 or 3 calls a week. Making sure that you're blocking your number when you call so people don't say, "Oh, John's calling me, I better be on my best behavior." Having it come from a different phone number or even a blocked number will make sure that you're getting a real response. The second part is making sure that your staff knows that they're going to be evaluated and the guidelines and standards you've put in place aren't just for fun. This is something you expect them to hit on a consistent basis. Once you've got that, keeping track of the scores so people know how they're doing and what they need to focus on will help you develop consistency throughout your firm. Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcouncil.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcouncil.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can. If you're not hitting those clients on a... Don't hit clients.